You are welcome to my podcast today. Help me welcome somebody else. Help me to share this video and like it also. And I hope that at the end of today's podcast, we will learn a thing or two. This is about Ukraine. So we're going to talk about Ukraine and the war between Ukraine and Russia. We'll talk about how it all started, the state of the war right now. We'll talk about what President Trump wants to do regarding the war. And at the end of the day, hopefully we'll learn a thing or two about it. So today's topic is Ukraine is gone. Ukraine, as we know it, is gone. As sad as it is to say, but that is the truth. That is the truth. This Russia-Ukraine war started about 3 years ago now. It's been 3 years. How time flies. I remember when this war started, many in Western Europe and here in America, we were all pumped up by the media, by propaganda, and I remember, having conversations with my friend or my friends, and I tell them this is not real. There is no way Ukraine was going to win this war. But, we were all propagandized. If you turn to the media, regardless of the media, it's about how Ukraine was going to win the war, how America and NATO must do everything possible to make sure Putin was defeated. I think the only voice as at that time that was saying something to the contrary was Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson and there's one other person that was saying that we should take a second look at it. So, here we are today. It's been 3 good years. 3 good years. I remember the Biden administration did everything. Lied to Americans and told us Ukraine is in it to win it, and that America will do everything possible to make sure Ukraine wins the war. Before I go into more details, I want to take us through history lane. Let me give a high-level overview of the issue, so that at the end of the day, we will be more informed about what's going on and what Ukraine really is. Ukraine is a vast country, second only to Russia in Europe. Ukraine has abundant resources. Coal reserve is estimated to be $57 billion. second only to Germany. Ukraine has a vast amount of rare earth metals. We're talking about graphite, we're talking about titanium, lithium, and uranium. Second only to China. And these are the things you need in high-tech industries. And these are the things that you need for electric vehicle batteries. So it's a very important country in Europe, to Western Europe, to America, and to Russia. Not just because of the resources, but because of its strategic military importance to Russia. And Ukraine was that red line that Russia and Putin was never going to tolerate joining NATO. So, in and around the mid 2000s, Ukraine started courting the idea of joining the EU. And you know the EU is an economic entity. So by 2007, Ukraine was granted full membership of the EU. And by 2008, at the Bucharest Declaration, Ukraine's intention to join NATO was announced. And that was the line for Russia. That was the line. Because NATO is not like the EU. NATO is a hostile military alliance to Russia. And remember that NATO, after the fall of the Soviet Union, NATO had literally annexed most of the countries that made up the former Soviet Union. So there were just few of them that are left, very close to the Russian border. And Ukraine, because of the size of Ukraine, its proximity with Russia, it has a wide border. So NATO coming into Ukraine would essentially mean that the whole of that wide border will become NATO's to watch and to occupy. So in 2013, a certain Ukrainian president, Viktor Yanukovych, he hails from the Donbas region, which is the east of Ukraine. He, as the president, he was considered as pro-Russian. But remember that the eastern region of Ukraine are ethnic Russians. They are Russian-speaking. So one would argue they are Russian. Right? They are Russians. So if Yanukovych is pro-Russia, that should be expected. So instead of reinforcing the EU agenda, he was also in favor of having trade relations with Russia. So he signed a trade agreement with Russia in spite of the EU. So once he did that, it did not go down well to the powers that be in Brussels and in the US. So fast forward, the so-called Colored Revolution took place. It was alleged to have been sponsored by the US. There was riots and violence. A few hundred people died in the process. And at the end of it, the duly elected president, Yanukovych, was ousted and instead replaced by another person. The people of Donbass from the east resisted. So Russia was observing and sensing that America's fingerprint was all over the color revolution, and also fearing that the newly installed leadership, as a puppet of the West, would facilitate Ukraine's joining of NATO. Putin decided to invade Crimea. That was in 2013. The logic of the invasion is simple. Once Russia invaded the region of Crimea, which was part of Ukraine, then Ukraine can no longer be admitted into NATO because it will be adjudged that Ukraine was occupied by another force. And until that issue was resolved or is resolved, they cannot be admitted. So that was a simple logic. So this singular action by Russia gave impetus to the separatist movements in the eastern region of Donbass, of Donbass. That means the region of the Donetsk and the Luhansk People Republic, they are called. So those two republics in the east began to intensify their secession from Ukraine, unless the duly elected president of Ukraine was reinstated. And this, that's not going to be possible. It's a high-stake power game that's going on out there. And recall that this same action by Russia, Putin had experimented in Georgia a few years before. The same issue. Now, the two things that are common between what happened in Georgia and Ukraine is that the regions that Russia invaded were all Russian speaking. And what Putin decided to do was to annex these republics in Georgia and in Ukraine. By annexing these republics, especially the Donetsk and the Luhansk in the eastern Ukraine, he is able to form a huge land bridge between the mainland Russia and Western Europe. That would serve as a bridge in the event that whatever is left of Ukraine became a NATO member. So in 2024, the Ukrainian army swung into action and attacked the breakaway republic in the Donbass, resulting in a brutal civil war that started since 2024. And to Russia's credit, all these years prior to the invasion, Russia had brokered a peace deal between the breakaway republics and Kyiv. One of such agreement was the Minsk Agreement. And though Ukraine signed the agreement with some of its European guarantors, they did not adhere to the agreement. And as the former German Chancellor Angela Merkel alluded to, that they never intended to adhere to it. The whole aim was to give them time to buy time, strategize, and to deal with the rebels from the east. So that was it. And Putin decided that they have had enough. It is time to invade Ukraine. He wanted to invade Ukraine. If you look at what most of the scholars have said about the invasion, both the historians and all whatnot, Putin wanted to be able to extract an agreement from the West regarding the security of Russia, regarding the neutrality of Ukraine. He did not want Ukraine to be a NATO member. Think about it. Russia is a great power. Think about the United States. You know how powerful US is? The sole superpower. It's a very rugged hegemony. Now, remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, if Russia or China or anybody were to load missiles in Cuba or Mexico, you think the US will let it slide? It's never going to happen. US will they will move heaven and earth to make sure it did not happen, in keeping to the Monroe Doctrine. So Russia did not lie low. They decided to invade, hoping that the US would negotiate. But Biden and his handlers were not in the mood for anything. And the European leaders saw it as an opportunity to once and for all deal with Putin and Russia. Now, what is the situation at the moment? It is sad, very, very sad, to say that Ukraine has lost the war. As hard as this sounds, that's the reality on the ground. Ukraine has been permanently damaged. There is no other way to slice the pie. Ukraine will never recover its lost territories from Russia. The Donbas region is now essentially part of Russia. I was saying this months ago, And I have had heated arguments with some of my friends regarding this. And if this war is prolonged, if Trump did not stop this war, a few more months from now, Odessa would fall. Odessa would fall. And once Odessa falls, a couple of more cities destroyed, Ukraine will become a dud nation. It will no longer be a viable country. That will be the end of it. And then the jackals and the hyenas, Poland will come in from the west and grab whatever they got to grab. And somebody else will come in from the north and grab whatever is left. And it's done. So what is Trump's plan to bring peace and end this war in Ukraine? We will take a look at what Trump plans to do, what he's already doing, and we'll see if he will be successful or not. Trump plans to end this war. He wants to do it. He said that during his campaign. Everyone knows that. But as good as that sounds, as good as his intentions are, he must be careful not to place an unreasonable demand on Putin or on Russia. Because Trump knows and Putin knows that he has won the war completely. Both of them know that. So Trump has to make the most of it. Trump has to save lives. Trump has to save the people of Ukraine. Trump has to save whatever resources that is left in Ukraine. Because if he continues this war, Russia would take everything. And if the West continue their arrogance, then they would drag everybody into the Third World War. For what? A war that would destroy Europe as we know it, and even America. To what end? So he has to end this war. He cannot use threat. He cannot threaten Russia with sanction, because Biden has done it. The West has done it for the past 3 years. It did not work. Russia's economy is doing well. If Trump decides to slash oil prices, let's say he begins to produce oil rapidly here in the US in order to drive down the oil price, to make sure Putin does not have money to prosecute his war. That will not stop Russia, because Russia, in the first place, see Ukraine and this war as an existential threat to Russia. So even if you drive the oil price down, they will continue to fight. And there's actually, and also there's a flaw that you cannot, that the price cannot go. For instance, it takes about $38 to break even when you produce the oil from Russia. That's why they call it cheap Russian oil. In Saudi Arabia, it's about $15 to break even. 12, $15. Here in the US, it's about, for the old oil fields, it's about, give or take, $35 to break even. But the newer fields, or the new federal lands, those ones, the new ones, it will take, from the report, it's going to take up to $60 to break even. So even if you average the two, and Trump produces oil and lowers it so much, up to $50, Russia at 38 will still make a decent profit to continue to go on. And there's a level Trump cannot push oil prices down. There's a level it cannot go, because if it crosses a certain level, the oil companies will not make profit. Then it's not worth it. There's no need to produce oil anyway. So Trump has to be very realistic about what he would say and what he will not say. My prediction is that the final deal will be whatever Russia says, whatever Russia wants. They will simply tell Trump, this is what we want, this is what we want, this is what we want. And of course, one of them would be Ukraine cannot be a NATO member. Never. That would be the number one condition. And number two is the territories that Russia has right now. Over 20% of Ukraine is gone, belongs to Russia. And this 20% is where everything is in Ukraine. All the resources, the ports, the economy of Ukraine is in the east. So Russia has it. Russia has it, and about close to 60% of the natural resources is right now under Russia. It's gone. They will have to give it up because millions have died. There's no way. Russia has lost, they say, according to the reports, Russia has lost at least 500,000 men, soldiers, at least 500,000. And Ukraine has lost at least 1 million soldiers, at least, if not more. So there's no way they're giving back those lands. Anybody who thinks of that is under illusion. It's never going to happen. And the other demand they may have to place is, we don't want Zelensky. Get rid of Zelensky. They are likely to say that. And Trump will say yes, because he wants to end the war. I was listening to Trump's press conference this evening. He was saying that, that Zelensky's approval rating is 4%. And he began to question who even did the polling anyway, that all the people are dead. Where did they get the number from? So what does that tell you? That tells you that he's open to getting rid of Zelensky. That's what it means. And during this negotiation that's going on, the one that is going on right now, they had one in Saudi Arabia. And I hear Zelensky was saying that he was not invited, or Ukraine was not invited to the table or to the meeting and they are not going to accept any agreement that is reached beyond their back. Well, he cannot make demands the way things are. He cannot. And the truth is, it is possible that the main agreement would have been reached anyway before he's invited to the table. And it will just be a formality. It will be a take it or leave it. And I'm sure they will be fair. Trump will try as much as possible to be fair, to extract what is reasonable from Russia. Trump will do it. But it will not be a situation whereby, he will make demands and insist. Because sooner or later, the opposition will rise from within Ukraine to take him out. Because they will question what he has done, how he has managed this war, why he did not bargain and extract peace at the beginning before the whole of these cities were pummeled and destroyed. So it's not going to be easy for him. Absolutely not. Because they know Zelensky does not have any leverage at the moment. That sounds very awful, but that is what it is. And NATO is toothless without the United States. That also is the truth. And Trump has a lot of issues. He's barely 3 weeks old into power, into office. He has a lot of domestic issues. He wants to rebuild the economy. He wants to bring down inflation. He wants to build a wall and close the border. He wants to deport millions of people. He wants to build the Iron Dome. He wants to give a massive tax cut. So all these things will cost money. Huge capital investment. And as a businessman, he is not about to go into this fool's errand anymore. He wants to bring it to end. He will. And he should. A few days ago, he sent his Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, to NATO. So Hegseth went to NATO to address them, to convey President Trump's message to NATO regarding his plans for peace in Ukraine. I am going to read a few of his remarks. I'm going to read it out for you guys. And once I read it out, it's left for you to glean into it and reach your own conclusions. And I quote, this is from Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. And I quote, it says, "The bloodshed must end. The bloodshed must stop, and this war must end." He further stated, Trump intends to end the war by diplomacy and bring both Russia and Ukraine to the table, and that the West must be real with the reality of the battlefield. You know what that means? The reality of the battlefield, meaning Ukraine has lost the war. He also said, we must realize that returning to Ukraine's pre-2024 borders is an unrealistic objective, and chasing this illusionary objective will only prolong the war and cause more sufferings. So what is that pre-2014 Ukrainian border that Trump is saying that returning to it is unrealistic? He meant the way Ukraine was before Russia invaded it, meaning the eastern region of Ukraine, the Donbas region, the economic powerhouse of Ukraine is gone. That border has to be redrawn, and it will become part of Russia now. That is what the peace agreement will be. Then he says, it is instructive to note that according to the Russians, the US and the NATO must understand that under no circumstance will Ukraine join NATO. He further stated that a robust security guarantee for Ukraine is to ensure that the war will not begin again after it ends. It must not be Minsk 3.0. Remember the Minsk agreement that I mentioned that Putin brokered in 2014 and Ukraine did not adhere to it? That's what he meant. He's saying that this time around they will abide by the agreement so that the war will not happen again. He says, according to Hexet, Ukraine will not be allowed to join NATO, and any troop deployment must be international and non-NATO and will not be covered under Article 5. You guys understand what that means, right? That means when they reach this agreement and they decide to put troops to observe the lines, the borders, it will not be NATO troops. Even if those troops will be contributed by Europe, they will not come under the guise of NATO. And if anything happens and those troops are attacked, nobody will invoke Article 5 to go to war with Russia. That's what this is saying. That is what this is saying. So guys, that's why I told you guys that Ukraine is gone completely. So Trump's aim is to broker an acceptable peace, an acceptable deal, so to speak, so it can end this carnage. Because it understands that Russia is in a position of strength, and he needs to achieve this peace and move on. Trump has a short time. He has 4 years to achieve everything that he needs to achieve, and all the things that he set out to achieve will take some presidents 12 years or 14 years if they are very serious people to do. But he will do them in 4 years. And we have seen what has happened in just 3 weeks. what Doge is doing, what Elon Musk is doing. That's a topic for another day. So guys, I hope that this podcast has been instructive. It's a little bit long, I apologize, but I hope it's been very instructive, and you're free to leave me a comment on the comment section, and don't forget to send the podcast to your friends, to your loved ones. Ask them to like it and to subscribe, and you can follow me on YouTube at Lord Chima, and I'll see you guys again. Cheers.